did you do? I let her out. Who? Annabelle. I'm sorry. What else did you touch? Everything.
I actually wanted to start just by asking you about kind of your franchise philosophy, because it's interesting that over the course of your career, you've launched multiple franchises, but you've also never directed a full trilogy. Yeah. And I'm kind of just curious how you kind of like...
Me. Yeah, it's weird. It's like everyone wants me to do the full trilogy thing. I'm like, if you're lucky enough to get me to come back to do the second one, A, and B, usually by the time I get to number 2, I always feel like I've said all I need to say, and I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move on to go start something new, do something else that excites me, and that's how it's always been for me. Like for me, it's a very organic process. I only make movies that I want to see. That's the bottom line.
Sure, and I imagine it affects your storytelling as well, because it makes you kind of focus on the short term as opposed to the long term.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and the cool thing is, I've been very fortunate that the horror films that I've made have gone on to spawn multiple films, because that means I've created a world that people really were receptive to, or created characters that people like and that they want to come back and visit. And I think that's kind of the key, is to create a world that is rich enough that you can continue to explore it.
I actually had the opportunity to visit the set of the film last year when it was in production, and I mean, you can kind of see it in just what's around us. The level of production design and detail is incredible. I'm curious if each of you might have had a particularly favorite detail from inside the Warren house.
Mine is not as peculiar, but I loved the wallpaper.
So did I.
Yeah. Because it very much reminded me of like The Shining, it was just so iconic, and it was just creepy.
Yeah, well, it's terrifying. I mean, it's just, there's something eerie about it whenever it's dark and there's shadows cast on this creepy 70s wallpaper.
Yeah.
I loved the artifact room, of course, just because there's so many things to look at in there, and the fact that, that place actually exists. Is terrifying.
I like the artifact room as well, because there's a lot of attention to detail in it. Like, there's so many, most of the things in there are actually real. They try to get like things from real sources, so there's a bunch of like witches bottles in there that are real, so it's really fun.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm curious just about your kind of experience seeing the finished film, because you obviously lived through this, you had kind of all this stuff thrown at you, but is it still scary to see the finished film?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting. This is the first horror film I've ever been a part of, so I was always curious of that aspect of it. My favorite thing was how fun the movie was. I think it carried really well, and I think audiences are going to have a really fun time watching. But also, they're going to get the crap scared out of them too. So
it was cool sitting with everyone and hearing all the reactions as well. It was very interactive. It's like one of those like fun scare movies where everyone's kind of in it together. So it was a cool experience to see it with everyone.
Having the experience of working on not only Annabelle Creation, writing the script for that, but also the script for it, I'm curious if that kind of prepped you to a certain degree for working with a younger cast in the making of this movie.
Working with the younger cast, I don't know how. Maybe I don't know, but consciously I don't know if it prepped me. Fortunately, my younger cast they're old souls, and they're great professional talents that it never felt like I was trying to, herd cats or something. It was so I guess some people maybe expect that, but it's just really it was just a lot of fun. It was nice to have that sort of youthful vibrancy that I hope we got to capture a little bit in the movie, and that sense of that energy I really latched onto.
Yeah.
You should feel great.
I'm really proud of that.
You should be proud of that. That's fantastic.
You're not coming back for Conjuring 3 to kind of continue that thread, but you developed this story. You had a very big hand in developing it. So I'm kind of curious how you see your role in the expansion of this.
Obviously I wanted to continue to move in the right direction, and even though I'm not directing the third one, I have a bigger umbrella vision for it. I remember pitching to Vera and Patrick when we were shooting Conjuring 2 in London, on the cold, rainy streets of London. I remember telling them that I have this idea for the third one where it's more investigative story. And so I want it to feel different to the first two movies, so it's not a haunted house movie anymore. And we need to keep finding different things to make it feel fresh. Otherwise, it's going to start feeling stale. We have to find, a different flavor, a different story to make it feel different and original still. Even though it's the third one, it can be original. And so, those are the things that I'm very adamant about in helping sort of shape the world, and of course, trying to find the right story to tell.
Actually, I'm curious if, of all the stuff that's thrown, if there was anything that you were thinking about considering, but ultimately just couldn't find to fit in the story that you wanted to tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's always stuff you have to take out. This movie was, because we're dealing with the artifact room, and there are so many artifacts, and there's so many stories we could play around with there, and so many scares we could play around with there. There was a lot of stuff I had to sort of leave. I'll save that for later or something, or hopefully down the road, because you just don't want to muddy the waters too much or make it feel, because eventually you'll just flatline. So yeah, there's a lot of cool ideas, but you just got to work with what's best fits the story as opposed to just,
Well, I mean, is there kind of a comfort almost in the fact that this is such an expansive franchise that you can take something that you're like, oh man, this is really good, but it doesn't work right now, but there is potential to use it later?
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. You have that kind of, hopefully I can use it for something else. But it doesn't really, it doesn't remove the sting out of it because I'm not thinking of the future. I'm always thinking of what I'm working on at the present, and that's the most important thing, right? But really, you just again, I just go back to the story and I try to think about what works best for the here and now, as opposed to
Don't your parents keep any creepy stuff around?
We keep it all locked away in a room so that we're safe. It's not really good for anyone to go in there.
Did you guys have a favorite day on set, and was it kind of something that when you were watching it, you're just like, oh, I remember that day? That was great.
Oh, I mean, for me, it was like all of the ferryman stuff. Yeah. That was my favorite sequence to film. I mean, it was a lot of physical work too, which was fun. And yeah, I just thought it turned out really cool and creepy.
No.
I always love watching the scene where it's above the hallway while you're running down the hallway, because it took forever to get it, because sometimes the camera would stop, or sometimes the camera would mess up or something, but that was one of my favorite scenes because that was actually the last scene.
We did it 25 times.
Yeah, that was the last scene
I can't run anymore.
After they got it, we did one last take, and I hid behind the door, and so she'd run up and she'd go, Judy, Judy! She was about to pound on it again, but then I pulled it open, and I went, what? And then she fell. She was like, ooh.
Scared me so bad.
It's hilarious.
Everything you see in here is either haunted, cursed, or has been used in some kind of ritualistic practice. Nothing's a toy. It's safer for these things to be in here than out there. Sometimes it's better to keep the genie in the bottle.
I was so interested to see how the artifact room, kind of just walking around, was gonna play, because it felt like each take was so long, because you're just exploring it all. And I'm like, it's just me walking. But it looks so cool, and it's cool because as the audience, you're getting to see everything for the first time with Daniela. So seeing all that play out really well was awesome. Plus, I was stuck in there for so long,
Do you view this as a complete trilogy? Is that kind of a view that you possess on it?
No, because I don't know. I guess because I think of a trilogy as a beginning, middle, and end, or a first act, middle act. That's how I look at it. But I don't see. I think there's so many more stories to tell from her, because I really do think her evil is limitless in the way you can scare people. So yeah, I don't really look at it as a trilogy, or never did setting out when I was telling the story. I try to look at each movie sort of individual.
Do you know exactly what you want to direct next? Is that set in stone?
I think I kind of know.
So, can you confirm, is this Aquaman 2? Are you going to come back to it?
It won't be Aquaman 2 just yet.
Oh, okay. So you have something that you're planning on in between, basically?
I have something else I'm cooking up.
Okay.
I'm not ready to share just yet.
Do you think you'd ever be inspired to come back and maybe direct a spare chapter or something?
Do you mean Aquaman or Conjuring?
Oh, Conjuring, sorry, okay. Yeah.
Listen, I never say no to anything. That's what I've learned. It's great, but I actually just think, I love sort of discovering new young filmmakers, upcoming filmmakers, and I think, these movies really allow you know, these filmmakers the opportunity to come and play in our world. Sure. Yeah.
Something about that doll really does fascinate people. It's sitting in a box and behind glass. Sometimes her legs move and her arms move. She's supposed to be a little girl's cuddly toy, but she's not.